Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, August 25th around here, and we got football to talk about. We have actual football to recap from this past weekend. Iowa State gets a huge win over there in Dublin, massive win over Kansas State, and very sloppy game early, but we'll talk about how it got much, much better at the end, and Iowa State looks like a team that can compete for the Big 12. Then we got fall camp intel, a lot of different things going on. Bryce Underwood has been named the starting quarterback for Michigan. A couple updates for Miami, looking a little bit stronger on defense than you would think, and a couple other things there. And then we'll turn the page to week one. We'll get into a couple of questions getting into week one, a number of things around Ohio State, and some new play callers down there that we'll talk about at the end of the show. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing. We had football this past weekend for the first time in 215 days. That's how long it was between the Ohio State-Notre Dame National Championship and this game over there in Ireland this past weekend. And it was a sloppy game early. For about 2.5 quarters there, they were not playing great football, and I think the coaches would tell you that. Now, the defenses played very well. Obviously, rain was very much involved in this conversation throughout this game, but it was sloppy. There's no doubt about that. In the first half alone, we got 3 fumbles, a muffed punt by Dylan Edwards, who actually left the game after that, going to be a huge injury if he can't come back for Kansas State soon. Offensive line caught a pass, and it was actually the first pass that was caught in the game. 1 of 3 red zone trips ended in any points for either team. It was all over the place. It was very, very sloppy, very ugly. A couple of play calls that I thought were a little bit weird, especially in the rain, but at the end of the day, they've kind of found their stride towards this second half and played some really good football towards the second half of this game. Iowa State is a team that really kind of tried to find consistency throwing the ball and really did later on in the game, but Rocco Becht kept them in this one. You know, in the first half, the most consistent offense they had was Rocco Becht's legs. He made a couple of plays here and there, definitely was a guy that was leading the way, although the numbers were not that great. And the rain was a huge, huge piece of that. A number of drops on both sides. Neither quarterback was just standing in there and throwing the ball confidently, particularly Avery Johnson, but it happened to Rocco Becht as well. Came away more impressed with the Iowa State pass catchers. When you have Eli Green and Brett Eskelson making catches for touchdowns, when I thought coming in Chase Sowell or Xavier Townsend was going to have to step up for this team to be, even in remote danger down the field, it's a relatively deep group. I do think it's a group that could really develop into a nice one. Love what Eli Green brings to the table. I think Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend, although they were not heard from much in this game, will be big players down the way for Iowa State. But regardless, came away really impressed with what Iowa State had to bring to the table. Thought they did a very, very good job in this game, especially towards the end, getting that pass game going. If you were just sat watching this game, Avery Johnson looks like he had a day. It looks like he put together an incredible performance. Almost had 300 passing yards, had 3 total touchdowns. He just never really looked comfortable until he threw a couple of balls down the field, especially the 63-yard touchdown that kept them in this game. Really, really remarkable throw. Outside of that, there were no, breathtaking throws. There was the deep shot to Jace Brown, but it's a little bit underthrown to a wide open guy. So there's definitely some worries there. It's definitely a little bit up and down, but at the end of the day, the conditions, the circumstances around this game totally changed the way that we talk about this game. So not necessarily going to bury Avery Johnson by any means. Definitely still some worries that I'd like to, get past with him, but it's definitely not the way that Kansas State wanted to start their season. They were the favorite in the Big 12 going into this thing, although there weren't many quote-unquote favorites in that conference. Kansas State was looked at as the team to beat, and Iowa State went in there and they played really, really good football. Also, the final drive from Iowa State was incredible. They go down and they score to go up by, I believe it was 10 at that point, 24-14. Kansas State makes a massive play. Right on the first play, they go 65 yards on one play, make a massive, massive throw by Avery Johnson. And then Iowa State gets back on the field like that didn't happen. They get back on the field and have absolutely no doubt in what they're going to do. Carson Hansen really starts the offensive line of Iowa State, who really struggled early in this game, especially with some of the simulated pressures that they were throwing at him. Thought Joe Klanderman on the Kansas State defensive coordinator side did a great job in the first half. Can't really help that you're getting blown off the ball in the second half. The offensive line for Iowa State played really, really good football, and then Taylor Moser made the play call of the day at the very end of this thing. I had Carson Hansen leak out on a 4th and 3, went down to the goal line, and for every under-better out there, they got very, very lucky. He was just short of the goal line. For every over-better, man, I apologize. That was a tough beat, but it's only up from here. That's the good way to look at it. When you get that out of the way in week 0, you're rolling the rest of the way. But I talked about this, going into this game. I said the loser of this game was not going to make the Big 12 title. I fully believe that. And it's not to say that Kansas State is a bad team or they don't have a shot to do that. It's just to say they're staring down a schedule of teams that are right around how good they are, and they pretty much have to run the table. Maybe they can lose one more in conference, but the reality is they have a lot of stuff to figure out. They have time to figure it out, but it's definitely one of those things that this game was going to decide which one of these teams was behind the eight ball, which team was in front of it. Kansas State is quite a bit behind it in a conference that I don't know if you're going to be able to make up even that margin in the time that you have. So that's something to watch. Maybe Kansas State can prove me wrong, and I'd love for them to, but I'm still going to lean into Kansas State will not be in the Big 12 championship, and we're going to look back at this game as a huge turning point for that. On the Iowa State side, they can win the conference. There's no doubt about that. It was not pretty football in the first half, and if they play that level of football, then we have a little bit of a problem. But I thought Rocco Beck played the game that he needed to play. It wasn't pretty in the first half. I believe it was under 50% completion and going into halftime. He made the throws that he needed to. He had unique toughness that he's always had really throughout his career, but he made big-time throws when he absolutely needed it to. He made big-time runs when they needed him to make those plays. And then on the other side, you had Carson Hansen take over this game late in this one, and when you have a team that can go down the field with, I think, 5 minutes about left in the game, 5.5 minutes left in the game, and win it without giving the ball back, you have a team that can win the Big 12, because all of these teams are going to be so variable and so weird and all over the place throughout this season. The one that just plays consistent, the one that is the steady Eddie of this conference will win it, and Iowa State seems to have at least that idea. They have that ability to be the even team, to be the team that can run the rock, that can impose their will late in games and hold on to these even 10-point leads in this conference. That's going to make a huge difference. Obviously, we'll find out more about this conference, and I don't know how pretty it'll look this weekend, but it's week 0. So let's not try not to overreact. Kansas State still a very good team, still in the race for the Big 12, just puts them behind the 8 ball, and Iowa State in a great position moving forward. Then you have this UNLV game. UNLV 38, Idaho State 31. This is something. This UNLV team is something. I don't know what to say about them. Really, I can say they're going to be really fun to watch for just about anyone that's not a UNLV fan. This is a very weird team, and a team that I don't think they're going to be very good on the defensive side of the ball. Now, they have names, and that's all well and good. They are a very talented team on paper. These guys didn't work out at other stops for a reason. These guys are at UNLV for a reason. So I think you're putting them in a position where Jaden Thomas had to save you in some respect in this game. Went for 147 and 2 scores when they absolutely needed them. And he might be the best running back in the group of 5 this year. There are a number of really, really good players, even just in the Mountain West, with Scott Trey Humphrey down at New Mexico and a number of other guys. Sire Gaines up there in Boise State. Jaden Thomas is a difference maker, and he is a guy that they're going to need consistently throughout the season because Anthony Colandrea and Alex Orji showed that they can be shaky at times. Anthony Colandrea overall played a really good game. Alex Orji obviously had that massive fumble on the goal line that kind of got this thing kicked off for UNLV on a very weird note, but at the end of the day, I think UNLV is in a position where they're just going to be a weird team. I think they can put it all together. I think Dan Mullen can get, especially this offense, playing really well, but they might have to score 40 points a game to really win this thing. So they're still a team that I'm going to be watching very closely, still a team that absolutely can make a run at the CFP, but I came away fairly nervous about this team right after this one. Also, shout out to Jordan Cook on the Idaho State side. Not a perfect game by any means, but had a receiving touchdown just for fun, had a passing touchdown, I believe, and played really, really tough, really good football. UNLV comes out on top, but not necessarily feeling super great if you're a UNLV fan right now. This might have been the story of the weekend outside of Ireland for a number of different reasons, but Kansas looks like a contender, and it really just comes down to if Jalon Daniels is healthy, this team can do really special things. We saw what happened towards the back end of last season. We saw what happened the season before that, where they start 6-0, college game day comes to town, everyone is around that team. They fall off a cliff from there for a number of different reasons, but he went 18 for 20, 176, and 3 touchdowns through the air, added another 47 on the ground. Probably should be taking less hits. I understand you want to get out there and show that you're healthy and be able to run, and that's part of what makes him special, but he might want to calm down just a little bit. I think taking all those hits is a very, very nervous thing for Kansas fans, but he was able to stay healthy through this one. Cam Pickett stepped up on the outside, a guy that is huge for the depth of this receiving core. If they can get Emmanuel Henderson added into that, it's going to be a really fun group on the outside. Maybe not quite as good or experienced as a year ago, but still plenty good. And they obviously have Daniel Highshaw and a number of running backs that are going to add to this thing as well. But this Kansas team is fun. This Fresno State team is not going to be a bad team. Now, I don't know if they'll compete for a CFP spot or a Mountain West championship, but they're going to give teams a good run for their money in certain games, and Kansas handled business very comfortably. They get Missouri in 2 weeks. They go to Missouri, actually, in 2 weeks. If they find a way to win that game, they could be 6-0 walking into Texas Tech with everything on the table for this football team. It's a huge one. There's no doubt about that, but Missouri's still trying to find a quarterback. So if they don't have that fully figured out by then, I don't know. The Jayhawks go in there, win that game, and then maybe they're the team to beat in the Big 12. Western Kentucky got a pretty comfortable win over Sam Houston. There was a moment there where it got pretty interesting, and Hunter Watson and company started making some big-time plays, but Maverick McIver can really spin the rock. He threw for over 400 yards, came over from Abilene Christian, the FCS level, to Western Kentucky this offseason. Really good player, and absolutely a guy that fits what Western Kentucky likes to do. Matthew Henry, Katie Hutchison on the outside. Marvis Parrish is someone that really kind of popped in this game, a running back for Western Kentucky that could very well be a big-time star in the Conference USA, and obviously it's kind of tough for that Conference USA champion to find their way to the CFP. If Western Kentucky goes undefeated, then things could get a little bit interesting, and this is a team that has a lot of offensive firepower. If they can tighten the screws just a little bit defensively, this thing could get interesting for the Hilltoppers. Then we got Hawaii Stanford, and this was a great nightcap. There's no doubt about that. This was pretty much the perfect college football game in a lot of different ways. It was weird football. It wasn't perfect. There were a couple of coaching decisions that didn't make sense. There were a couple of plays that were a little bit all over the place. We had Micah Alahado, battle through an ankle injury for the second half of this game. Stanford really felt like they had something going early on in this game. Micah Ford made play after play for this run attack, and they got their first touchdown by a running back since 2023, or at least the first rushing touchdown for a running back since 2023, which doesn't seem real, but at the end of the day, Stanford does come out on the wrong side of this one, and really, I just want to talk about Kensei Matsuzama. An incredible story. The kicker for Hawaii that made the game winner. If you haven't heard the story by now, he was living in Japan when he was 20 years old, was working at a steakhouse at the time, took a trip to the U.S. to see an NFL game, and fell in love. And since then, he had been learning how to kick just from videos on YouTube. He's just been getting his work in from YouTube videos, understanding the kicking game a little bit better. And then he went to JUCO in Nelsonville, Ohio for the first part of his career, had made his way to Hawaii, and made the biggest kick of his life this past weekend. Incredible, incredible story, and the reason that college football is special. I tweeted it earlier this week, but he is the reason, among a number of other players in this sport, he is the reason why this sport is special and why it's so unique to every other sport in the world. Nichols dominated Incarnate Word, and I give a little FCS love because I feel like we have to early on at the very least, but this is a huge FCS upset. There's no doubt about that. This is a team, Incarnate Word, that came in as the number 4 team in the country at the FCS level. Tommy Rybacki was taking over for Nicholls State as the head coach. This was his debut. Massive win. Also, Deuce Hogan, sick name for your quarterback. So I really, really do like this team. I think they can do some really, really cool stuff. And Incarnate Word, after 2 years where they had 60 touchdowns and 57 touchdowns from their quarterback, they had 0 in this game. And they got a lot to figure out on the offensive side of the ball if they want any chance at the FCS. Tarleton State had the most straightforward win of the bunch this past weekend. Trey Page was a dominating force in this game. Had 170 yards, 2 scores, and Portland State didn't really have a shot. I think a lot of people knew that going in, but Tarleton State gets a big win, continues on their way, a top 10 team in the FCS. NC Central gets a big-time win over Southern, 31-14. This was the Chris Mosley show, 174 on the ground, 1 touchdown, dominated the line of scrimmage. Now, Southern ran the ball really well as well, went 250 on the ground, but no pass game for Southern, and that did him in. NC Central wins a huge one there. And then a bizarre situation in UC Davis Mercer. It was declared a no contest after a long rain delay in the third quarter, decided that it was unplayable, and they made it a no contest. Really weird scene. Doesn't really change the grand scheme of things in the FCS. They're not in the same conference. Will be an interesting thing when it comes to playoff seeding, but overall, doesn't really change much for these teams. Also, shout out Mercer for those helmets. Those are very cool. But that's totally side point here. Overall, an incredible first weekend. It was far from perfect. It was a little bit all over the place. There were coaching miscues. There were a lot of player miscues. There was what you would expect from week 1, or week 0, excuse me. It was weird football for a lot of different reasons, but college football is back in our lives, and that's all that matters. It was an incredible weekend with a lot of really good moments, some great characters, some new heroes of college football, if you will, and a massive win for Iowa State in their pursuit for a possible CFP bid. But let's take a break here. When we come back, we got fall intel all over the place. We got Miami's defense looking the part. We got Bryce Underwood, the new starter at Michigan, and a number of other things right after this, so stick with us.